How does monetary policy help us to manage climate change, and can banks allocate capital in a way that will help the environment? Well, today I'm talking to Markus Brunnermeier ahead of his presentation to the 74th Economic Policy Panel about the scope and the limits of green finance and green monetary policy. Hello Markus, welcome.
Hi Tim.
Now Markus, green monetary policy, green finance, they were fringe ideas only a couple of years ago, and now they've come into the mainstream. Does this surprise you?
Yes and no. Of course, it is the case that the climate change is one of the most challenging problems we face as mankind at the moment. But on the other hand, it's not natural that the central banks will become the major players in this space.
And the horizons, though, for monetary policy, they're so much shorter than they are for climate change. Does this mean that if central banks maintain their current remit, the monetary policy can't really do anything to affect climate change?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, if you look at monetary policy, it typically has a horizon of 2 years. If you think about financial stability issues, about 7, 8, 9, or 10 years. While climate change, we talk about decades, where, the horizon doesn't really match with the monetary policy objective and the effectiveness of monetary policy.
So if we change the purpose of monetary policy to affect the allocation to green assets, is this going to fix a distortion, or is this creating a distortion?
So to the extent that there is some distortion already there, you can use monetary policy to tilt it to a better outcome. So there is essentially an objective there you can achieve by doing that. Of course, it can also introduce other distortions. So typically we live in a world of the second best. So it's because you don't use the most natural instrument to fix a distortion which is causing the initial problems.
We have a common problem in climate change. It's a common challenge to all central banks. Are they approaching this problem in the same way at the moment?
So there's a common agreement that, central banks should be consistent with the policy of society. And most central banks think this way. There are certain central banks like the ECB who are at the forefront, but other central banks like the Federal Reserve Bank, they put less of an emphasis on it. But in general, there's a common agreement. One should be consistent with the objectives the policymakers put forward.
One solution for green finance is to ask banks to report to a regulator about their exposure to polluting firms. Is this practical? Can this be done?
It is challenging, and we see, for example, when you look at ratings like ESG ratings, environmental, social and governance ratings, that the ratings are very imperfect at this moment. So we are still in the early phase. So at this stage, it's not well done. But hopefully, as time passes, these ratings and also evaluating how polluting certain companies are will improve over time.
Whether you're a bank or a regulator or an investor, then there are multiple information problems at the moment, aren't there? We don't have consistent standards of reporting yet. We don't have clear visibility about what future policies will be and their effects. We have to take action today, but this might take several years to resolve. What can we do?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge, if you think about the risk dimension, is that policy uncertainty. So when policy suddenly changes, you have some stranded assets and certain assets lose its value. That's one of the biggest uncertainties. So on the one hand, you would like to have a policy laying out what the changes will be in the next decades even. On the other hand, you would like to keep the flexibility as things worsen or improve to readjust. And there's a tension there. There's some time inconsistency there. You would like to have a clear policy path in order to minimize the risk. On the other hand, you would like to have flexibility to readjust as you see how the environment reacts to various measures.
So, COP26 coming up. Markus, a lot of people have their hopes pinned on this. Is there anything that you want from COP26 that could really make a difference to any of these problems we've been talking about?
I think I really want to have a clear signal that technology will help us to get out of this and not, stifling consumption or stifling making, things worse, especially for the poor people on our planet. I think, and there should be a hopeful signal going this way. And the second aspect I think is important, that you want to use the economic and policy tools which really focus on the problem and don't go a roundabout way to do it in an indirect way, which is way less efficient.
Well, Markus, I hope that you get what you want. I hope we all get what we want. But thank you very much for talking about it today.
Thanks, Tim. It was a pleasure to be with you.
We're only scratching the surface today. Find out more details in the paper. It's called Green Finance, Monetary Policy and Climate Change. Authors are Markus Brunnermeier and Jean-Pierre Landau, so look out for that. Also, catch up with Markus at the 74th Economic Policy Panel, where he'll be talking about this subject. And that's on the 21st of October, and you can find out more about it, how to sign up for it, at economic-policy.org.